How important is your spouse to you? What position or place do they carry in your life? You see, the two most important relationships in our lives are your relationship with God and then your relationship with your spouse, which means that God comes first and then your spouse and then everything else in your life. Now, you should never give the place of God to your spouse, which means you should never love your spouse more than you love God. You must love God more than you love your spouse or anything else in your life. And then secondly, you should never give the place of your spouse, which is the second most important position in your life, to something else, to your parents, to your children, to your job, to your career. You should never do that mistake. You must always put God first, then put your spouse second, and then everything else follows. Now, the worst mistake that I've seen so many people do is that they treat certain things in their lives better than they treat their spouses. You find a man who regards his job, his workmates, his friends better than their wives. He's available to everything else while absent to their wives. And that's a very huge mistake, because I can assure you, there is reason why when God created man, the next person that God created for Adam was Eve, his wife. Not a mother, not a father, not a sibling, a sister or brother, not a friend, not a child. What God was communicating was that the relationship between a husband and wife is the primary, is the most important, and must be given top priority. Have you ever wondered why the Bible says, therefore shall a man leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife? Before there is a joining of a husband and wife, there must be a leaving of the parents. If you have to leave your parents to be joined to your wife, it means that you can leave everything else. It also means that your spouse is the most important of all relationships you have in your life. Now, when you come to a place where you have to choose between your spouse and your parents, your spouse and your children, your spouse and your friends and your workmates and your business and your career, my advice is simple: always choose your spouse. Your spouse is the most important. You see, you may not understand this at this moment, but there is a time in your life, especially when you're about to die, or when you are sick, or when you have retired from your job, you will understand that the most important person you should have given attention and priority in your life should have been your wife. I've had so many men, when they're on their deathbeds, when asked, if you're given more time, how would you spend this time? You always hear them say, I would spend it with my family and most especially with my wife. But these are people who were living reckless before then. But you see, before you die or when you're about to die, for one reason, you always put things into the right perspective. But you don't have to wait until then for you to prioritize your spouse. I'm calling upon husbands and wives. Let us learn to prioritize our spouses. One day you're going to find yourself in a position, in a place where you are only you and your wife. If you have not built a good relationship with them, you will regret for doing that.